Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Monday Motivation Spotlight. I'm Lesley Kaplan, welcoming you every week, Monday, same time, and usually the same place. And another week, as you know, for Am Yisrael, challenging time. Yesterday, I heard the Hazakah, the siren, for the first time. So that was quite a change for me in the center. So people can say, wow, you've been 8 months almost and you haven't heard a Hazakah. So I guess for me, it's new not being in the Jerusalem or in the north or the south. So what do we have lined up today? As with every single week, we have a special guest. Today's guest is a wow, and we've had many wows, but each story on its own is a wow. So firstly, I would like to thank, as always, our co-host ACI and our sponsor for the month, who is related to our guest, and I'll tell you in just a moment, Neshikha Honey, the bee people spreading sweetness and inclusion one kiss at a time. Every time I say their tagline, I love reading it. So let me co-spotlight our guest of the day. Where have you gone, Chaya? Here we go. I'm looking at you on the big screen. I'm going to add you as a spotlight. I'd love to introduce, and I'm totally honored to introduce, a special guest, Chaya Ben Baruch. Some of you may know her personally. Chaya, when I heard her story, I said, I have to have her as a guest. Never mind that she's a co-founder of Neshikha, but just her story is amazing. Chaya is an acupuncturist by profession. She volunteers her time for Chayal's Angels, who you're all familiar with. Tasha, we've had Tasha as a guest on our series before. So she travels around. That means she travels around to different bases around the country, giving and donating her time. She's also a kidney donor, which is very special. And she's very vocal about and an advocate for inclusivity. What makes her even more special, amongst everything else, that she's a true giver, is after giving birth to her sixth child who had Down syndrome, they then went on to her and her husband to adopt another child with Down syndrome. And then over the years, they adopted another 3 children. That means they have 5 children with Down syndrome. So she's very big into inclusivity, and I see that that's been included into Neshikha's whole standpoint. So Chaya, welcome, good morning. I'm going to remove my spotlight. We're so honored to have you here today. So please share with us your wonderful story, all about Chaya, how you got to adopt all these very special, wonderful children, and tell us about Neshikha, how you decided to get involved, and anything you'd like to share with us.
Thank you so much, first of all, for having me. Welcome, everybody. I hope everybody's safe. If there's an azakah, we'll probably have to stop talking for a bit. Before I speak to a group, for me, it's kind of like throwing a pebble into a lake, and I never know where the waves are going to hit, but my tefillah is always that it's going to hit someplace good. So far, so good. I grew up in New York, and then I kind of rebelled, and when I was 18, I went to Alaska. 9 months out of the year, there's snow in Alaska. And I went to study maternal behavior in sea otters because sea otter mommies take care of their babies for a whole year in the water. And I knew mommies that weren't taking care of their babies for a whole year out of the water. And so I wound up in Alaska where I met my husband. I had 3 children from my first marriage. And then Mr. Blue Eyes came into my life and he said, I want 3 kids. And I said, well, I already have 3 kids. He said, well, I want 3 more. And so we had Ari and we had Danielle. And then I had 2 miscarriages in between Danielle and my next baby. And I went out into the boonies in Alaska and I basically did hit-bo-to-doot. I screamed to God. It's great to do hit-bo-to-doot in Alaska because the snow is up to here and it's great insulation. So nobody hears you except for maybe the polar bears or God. My father had passed away. I had another miscarriage. My father-in-law passed away and I went into the boonies in Alaska at -40, which is pretty cold. And I said, enough, we can't have any more tsaros in our family. And I was learning to become a lay midwife. And the next pregnancy, I wound up 16 weeks with IVs because I couldn't keep even a glass of water down. And I had an alpha fetoprotein test and an ultrasound. This was over 32 years ago. And everything was supposed to be fine. And when I gave birth to my baby, I noticed that his ears were kind of folded over. And I knew that that was one of the signs of Down syndrome. So I asked my midwife, do you think he's Down's? And she looked at his hand, and he didn't have a typical simian crease, which most kids with Down syndrome have. And his heart at the time, which is the size of your fist, so a baby about 3 kilo, it's pretty small, nothing manifested. She just said, well, just take him to the pediatrician the next day. And I did. And my pediatrician checked out my baby, and he said, okay, go home. I said, well, do you think he's got Downs? And again, he looked for the simian crease. He checked my baby's heart. Nothing was showing up. Then he said, well, look, if God had to put a baby with Down syndrome into a household, you guys are a good address. So with that, I took my baby home. And a week later, my midwife came and she checked me out and she checked out my baby. And she said, Chaya, I don't like what I'm hearing in his heart. You need to go back into town, do an ultrasound. Turns out that my baby had major heart problems. He had holes in his upper chamber, in his lower chamber, and his mitral valve wasn't great. He was going to need open heart surgery, and they couldn't do it in Alaska. So I had to travel 8 hours on a plane with my baby to do open heart surgery. This was in February 1992. And I remember bringing a Walkman with me. You know what a Discman or a Walkman is? Some people don't know what I'm talking about. Because I said to the doctors, you've got to play music for my child during surgery. And they said, well, we don't have a stereo system in the surgery room. Of course, now everybody has a stereo system. I said, not to worry. This is the first Walkman in Alaska. These are the earbuds. You plug them in. And I need to talk to you, the anesthesiologist. I want you to talk to my son right now. I want you to, so that he gets to know your voice. And during surgery, I want you to talk to him. So 6 hours later, my son went through open heart surgery and successfully. And I asked the doctor, so did you play music for him? And they said, yes, Chaya. And I said, and did you talk to him during surgery? And they said, yes, Chaya. So of course, me being me, I said, so what did you talk to him about? And they said, oh, well, we told him not to bleed because he had just gone through open heart surgery. And we told him that because it was 1992 in February and the Winter Olympics was going on in France, they told him who was winning the bronze medal in slalom and who was winning the gold medal in skiing. And 4 days later, we went home. And yes, my son had Down syndrome. Having a heart problem and some of these other aspects are some of the signs of kids with Down syndrome. And then I wanted to find out everything I could about Downs. So there was a conference in Anchorage. We lived in Fairbanks. So that's the difference between Kiryat Shmona and Eilat. We went to this conference. There was a bunch of parents and professionals with all kinds of kids with all kinds of situations. And I heard 2 stories that changed my life. One story was a mother by the name of Jenny, who had just given birth to a baby girl named Pearlie. And Pearlie had Down syndrome. And in their family, they had an heirloom set of pearls that went from the oldest granddaughter to the next oldest granddaughter in each generation. And they got the necklace at the when the child got married. So Jenny's daughter had Downs. She started crying because she didn't know what she was going to do with this necklace, at which point her husband just kind of laughed at her and said, well, how do you know what's going to happen in 20 years? How do you know that our daughter isn't going to get married? So that put the idea in my head that, well, maybe my son with Down syndrome can also get married. So I started putting, shekels in the pushka for his wedding, right? The other story is a little sadder. There was a mother who had a set of twins who had cystic fibrosis. Both of the boys had cystic fibrosis, and unfortunately, they both died at the age of 18. And I asked this mom, I said, wasn't it difficult to raise 2 kids with the same illness at the same time? Under the same roof? And she said, well, actually, in our house, we had a journal. Anybody could write whatever they wanted. And when my sons died, I reread all of their journals. And I saw how wonderful it was that one had the other. They didn't go through this illness alone. I happen to be a twin, so I know what it's like to grow up with somebody there all the time. So I said to my husband, Yisrael, we got to adopt another baby with Down syndrome because I can't anticipate another pregnancy with Down syndrome. And that way Avichai will have a playmate who understands him, who has the same condition as he does. And in New York, there was a Down syndrome exchange. Anybody who wanted to give up a baby with Down syndrome, anyone who wanted to get a baby with Down syndrome. And exactly on Avichai's first birthday, a family came to us from Anchorage. A mother, a father, a grandmother, a 4-year-old brother, and a 9-day-old baby girl with Down syndrome. And they came to us and I thought they were just checking us out. And in the end, they came at 10 o'clock and they left at 2:30 and they left her in my arms.
Oh,
This was November in Alaska. She'd been homeborn. Her mother didn't expect a baby with Down syndrome. She only nursed, and Avichai had not stopped nursing. So I nursed the two of them together. And then I said to my husband, 9 months out of the year, there's snow on the ground. If they forget their hats or their mittens, I think maybe we need to live in a warmer climate. Yisrael grew up in Alaska, so he doesn't understand that there's 4 seasons, right? And I said to him, so let's go live on a kibbutz in Eretz Yisrael. And he said to me, because I thought the long term, that would be a society that everybody would know each other and they could work in the garden or in the, in the laundry. It would be a good life for them. And he said, that's okay, Chaya, except for the fact that I've never been to Israel. So I said, not a problem. You're going on a pilot trip with our friend Neil, who had lived in Kibbutz Degania. And you're going to go from kibbutz to kibbutz, and you're going to find a kibbutz that's going to want to take a family with 2 special needs kids with Down syndrome. Unfortunately, they went from the Negev all the way up to the Golan. There wasn't a single kibbutz that wanted a family. They basically said, we do very well with our problem children. We don't need anybody else's problems. Thank you, goodbye. But he said to me, but I want to come to Israel and I want to convert. And that's what happened. We came to Tzfat because this is the most northern absorption center that actually has snow compared to Alaska. That is, and Yisrael started at almost 40 learning Torah.
Taste it with your coffee.
sorry, 1 second. Okay, here we go. I muted. No, it's okay. I muted who was talking. Carry on, Chaya.
I don't understand the question.
No, somebody's noise came through. It's okay. Carry on. You
Oh.
came to Tzfat.
Okay. So we came to Tzfat. My husband would wear one kid in his backpack and one kid in their arms. And literally there were people that crossed the street to not catch whatever my kids had. I went to 5 different preschool teachers asking if they would take my son with Down syndrome into their preschool class. Normal for me is just a button on my washing machine, but normal, typical, whatever you want to call it. Inclusion was not a word yet in the Israeli vocabulary until I understood that Hashem sends you the shlichim hanachonim bazman hanachon. He sends you the right messengers at the right time. The 6th preschool teacher, her job was to take care of abandoned babies with Down syndrome in the hospital when she was about Shirut Leumi. And she said, I'll take him, no problem. So she took Avichai and she took Keren. And then 2 years after making Aliyah, we found another baby with Down syndrome that had been abandoned in Tzfat Hospital. She was a month old when we found out about her. She didn't have a name. Her parents left her after day 2. And they told her 17-year-old sister that she passed away. I'm not judging anybody, because in order for me to get another baby with Down syndrome, somebody else had to give birth to them and somebody else had to give them up. And so when I found out about her, it was around Hanukkah time. So we called her Shalhevet, which means the flame part of a candle. And I went to visit her every single day and asked the welfare department if we could adopt her. And their policy is if you already have 2 special needs kids, they won't let you adopt the 3rd. But they said she doesn't need to be in the hospital, so you can take her home. In the first year and a half, we're going to look for another family to adopt her. At which point I had fallen in love with Shalhevet, and I would cry every single night because I didn't know if tomorrow they would come and they would take her away. And I would never know where she was because adoption is closed in Israel. And I started writing letters to Anshe Knesset members. Rav Shmuel Eliyahu, the chief rabbi of Tzfat, started writing letters. And the first Rosh Hashanah after we got Shalhevet, she was on the 2nd day of Rosh Hashanah. I went up to the old city in Tzfat, and I heard the Kriyat HaTorah, and that was about Akedat Yitzchak. So I said to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, okay, if she's my Akeda, if she's our Akeda, if we have to just give up what we think is right and just put it into Hashem's hands, that's what we're going to do. And I stopped crying. I put it in Hashem's hands. It wasn't so easy. And nobody wanted to adopt another baby girl with Down syndrome. And like a bone to a dog, they gave us guardianship for a year, guardianship for 2 years. We finally got guardianship for her when she was 8. She was born in 1997, so she's about 25 now. She's still with us. And after that, we found out about another abandoned baby with Down syndrome. His mother was a single mom. We wanted to take him. We were with him for forever. The first day I saw him, he was 7 weeks old, and he looked at me through the crib, and he gave me this look as if to say, lady, either you're going to save me or I'm checking out. His esophagus wasn't attached to his stomach. They had to reattach it. He was being fed by a feeding tube. He was going to need open heart surgery, and he caught meningitis in the hospital. And my attitude was, how could a baby go through open heart surgery without parents? And the biological mom asked us to adopt the baby, and the welfare department said, no, he has to go into an institution. He's so fragile. He must go into an institution. And I called up the institution that they were going to put in Ori in, and there would have been 100 children in that institution. He would have been the youngest baby. There was no doctor 24/7. And I screamed at HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I said, how can this baby go through open heart surgery without parents? And I told the welfare department, I said, look, if God forbid something happens to this baby in your institution, easy for you guys. But if it happens in my arms, don't you think it's better for the baby? So my husband went to Rav David Vukatzera and Rav Yerma Barjel, and they both said, get a lawyer and you get the baby. And everybody else said, there's no way you're going to win. And by now, people are wearing umbrellas in the hospital room because I'm 24/7 with Ori, and I'm crying because I'm afraid that he's going to wind up in an institution. And Ori was 6 months old. We had a court case. The welfare department said their side of the story. Our lawyer, who we got, said our side of the story. And the judge, the Shaliach Hanachon, Basman Hanachon, the right messenger at the right time, said, like, what's it to you? It's a lot easier to put a baby in a home, and then if it doesn't work out, you put him into an institution. And the welfare department guy said, but Your Honor, have you ever been in our wonderful institutions in Eretz Israel? And the judge said, I happen to be a father, nobody knows this, of a special needs daughter who happens to be in an institution in Tveria. There is no institution in Israel that's better than a home. I'm going to give this baby a chance to be in a normal home. 6 months. So we got to take Ori home. And in 2006, July, I get a phone call from Schneider Hospital. Now is the time for Ori to do open heart surgery. Do you remember what was going on in 2006, July, in Tzfat, in the north? We were having the second Lebanon war. You could look out of my house and you could see Katyusha rockets coming in from Lebanon. So I said to my husband, Yisrael, do you want to stay here and do war with the kids? And I'll go to Schneider Hospital and do open heart surgery. Or I'll stay here and do war with the kids and you go and do open heart surgery. So Yisrael said, you're better with the medical stuff, you go. So I left my family during the war to go do open heart surgery with Ori in Petach Tikva. And because we were the second surgery on Tuesday, they didn't put us in intensive care heart babies. They just put us in intensive care regular babies. So we were in a room with 4 kids. 3 kids had parents attached to them. Everybody was attached to a respirator. And in the bed right next to us was a baby. She had pneumonia and nobody was coming around her crib. So I get a little sleuthy and I look at her name on the x-rays and I see that her name is Cohen LAA. LAA is not a name. I thought it was left at admissions. Turns out she was left at admissions. They misspelled Leah, and she had Down syndrome, and she was the girl of a boy-girl twin. They took her brother home. and she was abandoned in the hospital and she caught pneumonia. And so I said to the doctors and nurses if I could bring toys to this baby. And they said, yeah. And then I started talking about, well, maybe we could possibly take her home because she was abandoned. And I'm a twin, so it's like, if I was the worst twin, I would have been the one left. So they said to me, well, Chaya, Ori just went through open heart surgery, and it didn't take just 4 days. We were in there for at least 10 days. And when you're finished, you're going back to Tzfat. I said, yeah. They said, well, there's a war going on. We don't send babies to war zones. You can forget that one, Chaya. So I went home with Ori, but I still worried about Leah. And after the war, I went over to everybody that I knew, and I said, maybe your grandmother knows somebody who would take an abandoned baby girl with Down syndrome that's rotting in Schneider Hospital. Maybe your cousin knows somebody. And in the open market in the Shuk spot, I met my lawyer, and I said, enough. Do you happen to know a family that might be willing to take a baby with Down syndrome that's been abandoned in Schneider Hospital that has Down syndrome? She said, yeah, we'll take her. So when a big Rob says, get a lawyer, you get the baby, the lawyer can get a baby too. And then we started our organization, Birkat Derech, where we look for families that are willing to take special needs kids whose parents don't feel that they can handle it. And we got one more baby that way. We got a phone call around Tisha B'Av. Hello, I just gave birth to a baby girl with Down syndrome. We asked the Shelad Rav. The Rav told us not to bring the baby home. I heard about your organization. When I'm released in 2 days, we want to bring the baby to you, and you bring the baby to the family that will take her. So the first people on our list said, we're having our first chasana of our first daughter. It's not a good time for us. The second people on the list said, we have 4 daughters and 1 son. We want to take a boy if we're going to do this. So my husband said, Aya, just bring her to us. So that's how we got our 5th baby with Down syndrome, who unfortunately also had cystic fibrosis. Nobody knew that at the time that we got her, but that's what happened. And her name was something in Yiddish. I have nothing against Yiddish names. My mother was Brina and my grandmother was Mendel. Her name was Zisel, maybe something like that, which means sweet. But I said to Yisrael, it's not a right name. Let's think about another name. So he thought of the name Nechama because that's very appropriate for a baby born around Tisha B'Av time. And I really liked it, Nechami. And then I said to him, she's got 12 brothers and sisters, and I'm not calling her mother up to find out whether or not one of them are already named Nechama or Nachman, because in Ashkenazim, don't name a baby after somebody who is alive. If they were Sephardi, we probably could get away with it. I said, we're going to have to get used to Zisel. The next morning, unbeknownst to our conversation in Tzfat, I get a phone call from the grandmother that the parents had added a name to the baby. What name did they add to the baby? Nechama. So Nechami had cystic fibrosis and Down syndrome. And when she was 7 months old, and at that cute, gorgeous stage where you could just eat them up because you say, and they go back, and their smiles are so precious. She didn't feel good on a Thursday. And by Friday morning in bed with me, she was gone. She went to Olam Haba. And she had apparently gotten a meningococcal meningitis, which she picked up in the hospital. She was in the hospital quite a bit. And I had asked the biological parents if we could bury her in Tzfat, and they said yes. And I asked the chief rabbi of Tzfat if we could sit Shiva for her, and he said yes. And when I got up from sitting Shiva, I saw that they had put her in a brand new baby section of the baby section in Tzfat Hospital, in Tzfat Cemetery. And she was the only cover there. And I said to my husband, Yisrael, I think we should buy cemetery plots right near her. And he said to me, well, Chaya, I'm 1.80 meters, I'm 6'3". I'm never going to fit in a baby plot. I said, they haven't poured the concrete yet, ask. So they said to us, if you pay a lot of money, you can have 2 spots in a baby section. Normally they don't put adults in a baby section, but it's going to cost you a lot of money. I said, okay, the kids will never eat chocolate or ice cream or anything else. And let's buy the cemetery plots. After Nechami passed away, all that time the Revacha had never paid us because her biological parents had brought her to us. So technically we were her foster parents, but we didn't get paid anything. After she passed away, we got a check retroactively for taking care of Nechami for 7 months that covered the entire, almost to the shekel, the 2 cemetery plots that we then bought in Sfat Cemetery. But I don't want you to think that my life is sad, because it's certainly not sad. Remember, I have Avichai, my biological son with Downs. We have Karen, my adopted daughter. Then we had Shalhevet, Ori, and Nechami Zichron Alabacha. So Avichai's bar mitzvah was Karen's bat mitzvah. And we took them to the kotel, to Yerushalayim. And Avichai comes back from the kotel and he says, Hitpalalti shekeren tiya kala sheli. I davened that Karen would be my bride. Now, I had always anticipated marrying him to some girl with Down syndrome and her to some guy with Down syndrome, but I never thought one to the other because they grew up in the same household. You know a story like this. There was this Mesopotamian girl. She was 3 years old. Her mother died. She went to live with her auntie and she married her cousin. She had a nose ring. My grandparents were the same thing. That's what happened to them too. So I thought that they'd forget about it. For 5 years, I didn't give it any energy. I knew I wanted to marry them off, but not necessarily to each other. And then she came home from school. They go to an ultra-Orthodox school. She came home with a black on black Shabbos dress. She must have been 14 or 15. Personally, I don't like my daughters wearing just black. I'm very glad that color has come back to the Hasidic world. She tries on the dress. He looks at her and he goes, wow, wow, wow. And she blushes. And I say to her, let's pass the dress on. Let's give it to a gamach. And she says, no, he likes me in it. So I thought, I'm not going to win on this one. And then we get this note that the boys in Avichai's class have learned how to make their own sandwiches. Don't make them their own sandwiches anymore. Make them do it themselves. So Avichai in the morning says, Mom, make me a sandwich. And I say, no, you're big. You can do it yourself. Bye. What does he do? He goes to Karen. Karen, Tennessee sandwich. Make me a sandwich. And so she makes him a sandwich, and then he buys her hook, line, and sinker. And from now on, he's been making her sandwiches, forever, kind of a thing. He said, "Es a sandwich asikli yoter tov me'ima." What a great sandwich you made me, better than Mom. Okay. So 6 years before they actually did get married to each other, they came to me and they said, in another 5 years, we're getting married around Lag BaOmer time, as if it was written like, in Shemayim kind of a thing. And so I lied to them for 2 years. And I said, yeah, another 5 years we're getting married. And then they got smarter than me and they said, Mom, a year went by. In another 4 years, we're getting married. And then it was another 3 years we were getting married. So I went to their ultra-Orthodox school and I said, Avichai and Karen want to get married. Can they continue? In Israel, you can go to school if you have special needs until you're 21. Can they continue to go to school as a married couple? They said, Chaya, we think that's a terrible idea. All of the girls in Karen's class are going to want to get married. And you're opening up a Pandora's box. We don't think it's a good idea. So I said to them, well, did any of these girls ever wear a white Purim challah dress for a costume? They said, yeah, sure. So I said, well, I'm not responsible for opening any Pandora's box. That box was opened long ago. So they said, okay, so don't get married on Lag BaOmer because wait a while. Can you wait a month? So then there's going to be the Chofish HaGadol and everybody, the girls will kind of calm down. And can Karen wear a wig? And can you make it a small wedding? Because you're going to be inviting, 40 special needs people and nobody's going to know how anybody's going to react. So I said, we can switch it from June to July. We've already waited 6 years, not a problem. The wig is going to be a little bit of a problem because we're Sephardi, we wear kisui rosh, but if you ever want to film them, you want to pay for a payah, gay gesundheit. And Yes, we are going to the Mega Mall. As far as making a small wedding, I mean, with the side of the Khatan and the side of the Kala, technically that should have been able to happen. However, Avichai was such a clever man. He would go up to people and say, "You're coming to my wedding. You're bringing your grandmother from Bnei Brak, right? You're coming to my wedding. You're bringing all 7 of your children. I'm the side of the Khatan, side of the Kala. I have absolutely no idea who he's invited to the wedding, and he invited a lot of people." Um,
Hi, I just want to tell you our time is actually up, but your story is so inspiring. So can you just wind down now? We'd love to hear it. And I see there is in the chat, you have written a book on Amazon that people can hear your full story too. If you can just wind up, although even though I'm sure every single one of us would love to hear even more. And just tell us also for a minute just about how you got to Neshikha. And I know that Neshikha is also all about inclusion.
Okay, so my partner is Mary Newcomb. Everybody should have such a business partner.
And I thank you to Mary, who told me about you, and that's how you're on the show today. So thank you, Mary.
Okay, so we were both librarians in the in Sfat English Library. And Mary said one day, "Oh, I want to learn beekeeping." And I said, "Oh yeah, well I want the beeswax because I want to learn how to make organic lip balm, so that my kids could put the stickers on our products and then they would have actual work." And I asked my friend Chanya Al-Ghazi, what's a good name for a business like this? We started first out as lip balm, and she said, "Well, why not Neshikha, which means kiss in Hebrew?" And then Mary's bees started learning beekeeping little by little. I learned by osmosis, but I certainly don't know half as much as Mary knows. And we created Neshikha, and my daughters are models. And Dave, Mary's husband, was our video photographer, and he also started learning beekeeping, so he's now part of Neshikha as well. And we sell now honey and 100% beeswax candles. We still have our lip balms, funky jewelry. We're going to be at the Mega Mall, God willing, in another week. And we also I created actually an after tattoo balm for one of my sons. And it worked so well that for any scrape or owie or blister or anything like that, that we actually reformulated it to Mighty Balm. And if you buy a Mighty Balm tube, we give one away to a soldier, or we give you 2 and you give one away to a soldier. And my work with Neshikha, with Chayal's Angels, I've been giving away Mighty Balm, to guys in the base, all up and down Israel, and it just works like magic. And I think it's because we always add 100% love in our products.
Absolutely. Wow. Look, we can just hear that you're such a giver and so full of love. And as we said, we mention every time, the bee people, Neshikha, spreading sweetness and inclusion one kiss at a time. So the name was totally suitable. And Chaya, I could have definitely gone on for much, much longer. We could have taken this to at least an hour, but our podcast is half an hour. So I thank you so much for your amazing story and just sharing this with us. And I see, even though we did overstep the time, which I don't normally do, no one left the forum. So that just shows how engaging you were. So we wish you just much hatzlacha, and with your wonderful family, and with Neshikha, just wishing you much continued hatzlacha. And I think everyone now should go to Neshikha's site and just see now that part of the story behind it, and that they're all about inclusion too, besides the fact that you're going to be getting delicious and amazing products. So thank you so much for being with us. Am Yisrael is definitely a better place with having you and Miri around and with your amazing story. So thank you, and just may you grow from strength to strength, and just your family should be out now their stream and in good health. So thank you so much. Ladies and gents, thank you so much for being with us. Our guest next week is Danny Franks, who founded the nonprofit called My Israel. So we'll add more about it in the coming days, that you'll see what it's all about. Thank you so much again for being with us. Thank you to co-host ACI. Thank you once again to Neshikha Honey, now that you've met both of the founders. I'm Lesley Kaplan, and I look forward to seeing you next week on the Monday Motivation Spotlight. Thank you again. Chaya, it was wonderful having you.
Thank you.